Hello and welcome back to my channel. I appreciate you watching today. Today I'm going to be addressing, as the title says, changing out the exhaust manifolds and risers on my 1998 Sea Ray. It has a 7.4 Mercruiser engine. It is a Mercruiser Gen V as in Victor I-L29 engine. And so that's helpful information to have on the side. So what's different about this video from other videos that are out there? There's several videos on changing out manifolds and risers. I could not find one that addresses changing of the spacer. I have a 3-inch spacer between my top riser and the manifold. I couldn't find a video that talked about changing that spacer. There are also special gaskets that go in between that spacer and the riser on the top and the manifold on the bottom. I addressed that in the video. You need to have that information so that you're putting the right gaskets in the right places. Otherwise, you're going to have a heating problem with your engine. The other thing I saw that I didn't see in other videos is when I took off on the starboard side closest to the front of the engine, there's a heat deflector. And in the video, I talk about the heat deflector protecting the spark plug and spark plug wires that are close by, but in retrospect, it's probably to protect the fuel separator, which is right below that cylinder. I'm sure you don't want to get that gas hot, and you don't want any heat around that filter, that water separator, or you might end up with a vapor lock or worse yet, some kind of an engine fire. So it's very important that you get that heat deflector put back in place on that cylinder on the starboard side that's on the very front of the engine. The video doesn't talk about disassembly of the risers and the exhaust manifolds. It's pretty easy and straightforward. Some of the videos that are out there talk about carburation or fuel injection linkage that's hooked up to the riser. Mine did not include any of the linkage, so I didn't have to remove that. There were just 4 bolts on the top of each riser, and I took those bolts off, and then I loosened the hose clamps that were on the down tubes going through the exhaust so that the tubes would come off easy. And just pulled the riser tops off, pulled the spacer out, and then I proceeded to work on the manifold. So that's all I've got. Without further ado, let's watch the video. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Now, one other tip I've got for you is when I took the headers off, I didn't have any studs to hold the header up. So when I pulled the last bolt out of the header dropped, and this thing is very heavy. I'm not sure the exact weight, but it's a very heavy piece of metal. And it actually fell to the towards the bottom of the boat before I could grab it and pull it back. So I went up to the local auto store. I took one of my header bolts with me, and I purchased these studs. And basically, when I hang this back up in the engine, I'm going to use these studs. I'm going to put one on either end, and use it to balance the header while I put the other bolts into the engine through the manifold. So here's the header from the boat. So you have 2 gaskets. You got a riser, and then, you got a gasket down here, a riser, another gasket, and then you put the tops on top of the riser heads or the riser tops. So this is a closer inspection of the starboard header, and if you look, I mean, the headers look pretty good from the distance, but if you look at this particular header, you can see cracking in the header, and you can see some rust, although not too bad. And just basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to be salvaging this elbow off of this header for the new headers. So again, this is the starboard header, and so it would be sitting on the engine in this fashion. And so as I look at this elbow, the elbow is pointing towards the rear of the engine, and I want to make sure that when I replace this on the new header that it's facing in the same direction. It feels like it's plastic. In fact, I can turn this by hand, which is really kind of unusual. So use the channel locks here. Kind of spin this off. I want to be careful with it. I don't want to break it. It feels like it's plastic, but so again, when I put this on the new header, I want to make sure that this elbow is facing the rear of the engine. And then, as far as anything else is concerned, the new header has riser bolts that come with it, so I don't need those. It also comes with plugs, so I won't need those. So I think that's everything that I'm going to need off of this header to make the transition to the new one. So here's the new header. It's made by Bar Marine. According to the website, Bar Marine manufactures these in the United States. They come with a 3-year warranty, and the service people that I talked with that sell Bar were awesome. But if you just look at it, it looks different because the risers on this one comes with its own set of risers, which I'll be installing later. So I'm not too concerned about the riser. Want to make sure I put 2 plugs in here. And if I look at the back, everything's very similar. There are 2 plugs there to release water, but I've never used those. And if you look on the bottom, again, here's the spot for me to put this new elbow. So that's ready to go. So here's my elbow again. I'm just going to clean up the threads using a shop towel. Make sure the threads are good and clean. Now Mercruiser recommends that you use a product called Perfect Seal. And doing research on the internet, a lot of mechanics on the internet recommend Permatex Aviation Form-a-Gasket. I've also watched other videos where some mechanics will actually put plumber's tape, white plumber's tape, on the threads to make the seal. But I'm going to go ahead and use the Permatex Form-a-Gasket. And I shouldn't need a lot. I just don't want any leaking at this joint. So I'm just going to put a light coat on my threads. Pretty runny. Clean that up here in a second. Go ahead and start my elbow. And again, I did check it once I took it out, and it is plastic. I'm not sure why they use a plastic elbow. You would think it would be metallic. Try to keep my sight clean here so I don't get Permatex everywhere. And then I just want to screw this in until it snugs up. I'm going to snug it by hand, take it as far as I can go. And again, I don't want to strip this plastic out, so I'm just going to take it. Getting hard to move now. Well, I want to be careful with this. I don't want to break this. And it's facing the back of the engine like it was on the original manifold. So now let's move on to the next step and start putting the plugs in this manifold. Okay, now the kit comes from the company that sells the Bar manifolds, also sells the hardware that goes with it. So you can see in this hardware pack there are 2 plugs that I need to put in these plug spaces. I don't want to rest the manifold on this plastic piece. I want to be careful I don't drop it on that either, because I know it will crack. So I'm going to just kind of balance it on this plastic paint container. And we'll just go ahead and open these up. We're in a separate baggie inside. So here are the plugs. Just go ahead and put those right there. I'm going to use a paper towel to keep me from getting Permatex everywhere. So now what my object is, now I'm going to have to put these in here and screw those in. But I want to use the Permatex Aviation gasket sealer on these so they don't leak. And it's a standard 1/2 inch socket driver, and fits nicely in these plugs. Make sure we're righty tighty. In fact, I may use the a wrench to hold these so I don't get it everywhere. Don't need a lot on there. And just go ahead and start this by hand to make sure you're not cross-threading. That one's in. Now we'll do the second one. Permatex will run down the brush and not on the paper towel. And go ahead and put this one again, start it by hand.
Thread it in as far as you can, and now we'll put the ratchet on it. Just gotta hand tighten these. Put a fair amount of force on these. The Permatex will keep them from leaking. It's a high temperature gasket sealer. These are going to be high temperature obviously because they're right on the exhaust.
So I've got the 3-inch part for the riser. This is a 3-inch riser, and it's going to end up going right here. And a couple things I've got to do. I want to get it ready so when I get the header in the boat, then I can just put the riser on and put the rest of the risers on as well. So to do that, I've got a couple of plugs I need to put in that are going to match the plugs that were in the old manifold and riser. So this is going to be interesting. I've got to get a little bit of this goo on here. It's called Permatex. I shouldn't call it goo. Put that in that hole right there. So this plug requires a 7/16 socket. So I'm just going to tighten that, hand tighten that.
Snugs up in there. See, if you look at the other one on the old riser, didn't go all the way in.
I've got another one on the other side.
And apply a little bit of the Permatex seal to it. And this can go in quite a ways. There's nothing that's hitting up against on the inside of that. Again, I want to get the threads going by hand before I put a wrench to it. Make sure it's not cross-threaded.
Okay, so those holes are filled up. I've got one more. I need to put that plug on the end right here. So I've got, again, another plug that's use a 1/2 inch ratchet driver to drive.
And I'll apply the Permatex over a paper towel. Get this started by hand before I put the ratchet to it. and that's ready to go.
Okay, so now I'm working on the top of the riser, and I need to put the riser tubes, the exhaust tubes, on the risers. And there's also a plug hole here, and I need to put the plug in that hole. So I'm going to proceed to do that right now.
Let's open up this package. Here's the hole plug. And again, I'll just take the half-inch extension. Fits in there perfectly. I've also done the other header, and since it was a repeat of the header we did the first time, I just saved the recording time and some time for use. So you just need to know that you need to repeat for both headers, and you just need to make sure that the little bit of the angle tube extension for the water connection is going the right way. It either needs to go aft or forward on the boat, depending on where it was on the old manifold. So if you recall, that was that plastic elbow that I had to take off. And again, I want to get this started by hand before I put a wrench on it. And once you know every one of these is going on very easily, and this one is going on easy too. Almost spoke too soon. So you just put the driver on there, and we'll crank this down, make it nice and snug. There's not a torque spec on these, you just want to snug them up. And
your Permatex gasket sealer should seal those threads so you don't have any leaks. When you start your engine, you'll want to check these plugs on both your headers and also your risers, and make sure you've got no water leaks coming out of these plugs. If you do, you're going to have to back them out and reseal them. Either try the Permatex Aviation Form-a-Gasket again, or if you want to conversely use plumber's tape, you can do that as well. So that's the only hole on the riser that you need to fill. Just go ahead and put the riser up. Now there's two ends to this connector. There's a big round end, and then there's kind of an oval end. The big round end goes on the riser. And again, you want to make sure that all of your hose clamps are nice and loose, so this goes on easy. This hose clamp is wanting to fall in. I got to tighten it up a little bit. Let me make sure also. Now this is the riser for the starboard side, and so when I'm working on the engine, I'm going to be working this way. So I want to make sure that all of my screws are pointing the same way, and I can have easy access to them if I need to do any repairs once this is done. And I can see right now that the last one needs to be taken off and reversed. Now I just go ahead and push that down. And again, I've got all these lined up so I can access them easily once the manifold is back in the boat. And if I need to do any work, I can just get to these quickly and undo them, and I'm there. So that's it. So there's my riser ready to go. Well, today is a big day. I'm going to tackle 3 projects today. The original project was to change the headers and the risers on the boat. And while I've got everything stripped down, it's probably a good idea to do the spark plugs, contain the headers for the boat. And I keep them in the box. These boxes are really heavy duty, but it helps transport. Come really nicely packed, and there's the header inside there, but it makes it a lot easier to transport the header to the boat. Plus you don't have to worry about scratching the boat as you're putting these boxes up inside the boat. It's probably better than carrying bare metal headers that weigh a ton around. Plus these boxes have little handles on the side that you can use. So let's get started. So if you look closely, here's that that bolt that I stuck into the end of the manifold, and also the nut that goes on it. So that's just a temporary bolt. and that will hold the exhaust manifold in place while I put in the rest of the bolts and all the other holes, and then I'll take those two out at the very end and replace those with the permanent bolts that go in the hull. So now I've got to work on finding out where the next bolt goes. So let me find that. So a good thing to have on hand is I've got some really snug places down at the bottom of the engine hold, and I'm dropping wrenches and parts down there all the time. So this is just an extension magnet you can pick up at your local auto parts store. It's got a little magnet on the end, and you can just put it down into the engine hold area, and you can fish out any of the metal pieces that you've dropped down there, like wrenches, bolts, any parts that you're using. So I'm going to demonstrate my magnetic retriever. I just dropped a wrench down at the bottom there, and I don't know if you can pick this up coming up, but just pulls it right out, and you're ready to get started again. So I'm just going to hand tighten this, and then once I get them all in hand tight, then I'll come back with the torque wrench and torque them in. Okay, that nut's in. Now remember, these two right here, the two on this end, have to have that heat deflector in, so I'm not going to put those in until the last minute, where that one holding nut is. So that's where the heat deflector goes on that. So now I'm just going to keep, I'm not going to film all these because it's just, I just have to put four, let's see, there's 2 on each cylinder, so I've got 8 of these nuts that I need to attach. So you get the idea, so you just want to run them in and tighten them up. Okay, now I'm taking the last stud out on this end. I already took the stud out on that end and replaced it with a manifold bolt. And on the stud, again, please recall that there's this this retaining nut that holds the header on, or the exhaust manifold on. Now I just took that off, and now I need to release the stud itself. I don't think it's going to be in there too tight, but again, I believe it's 5/16. Oh, I can see it's loose already. Sorry, I said 5/16 earlier. It's actually a quarter. So again, this is going to slip right out because I can feel it's loose already. Again, the purpose of those studs is just to hold that heavy header. Keeps the gasket in place and helps to hold the header while you're getting the other exhaust manifold bolts in place. So there that is. So now recall on this end that the heat deflector needs to go in. So I need to put this, install this first. So I need to install these bolts, and then this the heat deflector will mount on these bolts. So I need to get these in first. So again, I'm just going to give it a quick spray with some WD-40 just to kind of loosen up the threads. Again, there's some rust in the headers. So again, I just want to get this started by hand so I don't strip it out. There it goes. I want to get my 9/16 extension. I'll go ahead and put this on. I'm going to continue to tighten it by hand. That's going in nice and easy until it gets snug, and then I'll finish snugging it up with a ratchet, and then I'll come behind and we'll torque all these down. Alright, I've got all the head bolts on the starboard side, and they're hand tight with a ratchet. Now the max torque setting is 25, but it says to start lower, like 18 to 20, tighten from the center out at that range, and then go back and tighten them down. You can do it in 3 steps. In fact, I'll probably do it 3 steps. Okay, I've torqued all the bolts down. Started beginning in the middle and worked my way out. But just to kind of show you, they're all torqued at 25 foot-pounds. So for my risers, as you recall, at the very bottom, I'm going to need a special gasket, and it's this gasket here. The gasket needs to be open. This slot, this slot, this slot, and this slot need to be open, and that's going to go very first on the exhaust header, and then hang on. So I've also got a 3-inch spacer that was on mine. So to hold this in place, before, if you recall, they had the very long bolts, and this is a redesign. So on the redesign, they give you these 3 items to hold that spacer on. So the spacer, the first thing you want to do is put the, let's go ahead and take the gasket off for now. Make sure I've got the right threads on. So there's a, you can't reverse these. There's only one way to go. So there's a coarse thread and a fine thread. So the coarse thread goes into the exhaust manifold, and the fine thread goes into the spacer. So I'm just gonna put these all on for right now. I'm going to need 4 of those. Now the secret to tighten these down is just use the 2 nut method, where you put the 1 nut on, then you put another nut on. You're going to tighten that up like that. So these nuts are actually 9/16 nuts. So basically what you want to do is hold one while you tighten the other one. Snug them up against each other. And then you can just use a ratchet and a 9/16 socket. Guess I won't need that right away. Do it by hand. So now I want to make sure all of my surfaces are nice and clean. So I'm going to grab a shop towel and clean my surfaces here. Again, you want the flow through gasket. I should clean the gasket off as well. All right. Now, if you recall from the gaskets that I pulled off originally, there was a fine line of gasket sealer, and it's this 510 Loctite. One word of advice, and I didn't know it when I got this, But this plunger goes back and forth like this. You can see it kind of moving a little bit. That's what opens and closes the hole inside. I actually poked a hole in it with a screwdriver because I didn't feel that until after I poked the hole in it. So now we really want to do a oops, this kind of heated up. So I want to try to do a continuous line so there's no gaps, and it's just, you just need a fine amount. There's a gap right there. Again, this is 510 Loctite, and I'll put a link to it in the description. It's pretty expensive. It was $17 for this tube on Amazon. Alright, so there's just only one way that goes on. It's like so. Now that that's in place, now we'll do the same thing with this in place here.
Now the directions in the Mercruiser manual say you have to let this set up for 2 hours before you start the engine. So I'm going to try to say that a couple times, but make sure you let this sit. Don't start up right away because it takes a while for this to set up. And it's set up by pressure and no air. So it's anaerobic. Anaerobic means no air, so you have to have it without air, and that's what causes it to seal. So have a 2-hour project ready after you put these in place, because you don't want to mess with it. Start your stopwatch so you know when it's going. So you just need a fine layer like that. Make sure there's no gaps. And there's a gap right there. Go ahead and get your cap resealed. Now I'm going to put my spacer
in place. My spacer will go right there, like so. And I've got a little Loctite on the outside. I'm not going to worry about that too much. Now I've got to get my I've got to bolt this down. And again, there was a screw-in cap, and the screw-in cap is on the back side. That's where it was on the other 3-inch spacer. So in the package they send you, they're going to send you lock washers and nuts. And again, these are the same nuts I used to tighten these down, tighten the studs in place. So there's one. Now you're not going to get a torque wrench on this. I mean, you can't get a torque wrench on it. So you're just going to, from what I've read, you just want to get it hand tight with one hand, not 2 hands. And just snug it up as best you can. Again, you want a lock washer on each one of these. I'll hand tighten for right now. One more on the back here. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking, what's the worst case scenario right at this second? It'd be if I dropped a washer or one of these nuts down that hole there, because then you're taking this whole thing apart. Because if that nut gets hot and gets into one of your cylinders, you're toast. Alright, so I'm just going to use a 9/16 closed-in wrench, and I'm just going to kind of tighten them down in a crisscross pattern. Just basically tightening these, get these kind of hand tight. Make sure they're all hands snugging up at the same pressure. So I'm putting equal amounts of pressure on the Loctite on all of the, and you can see it squeezing out, the Loctite squeezing out of the seal, which is good. Now that the exhaust manifold had paint on the surface, and I was hesitant about putting this on with the paint on there. I've seen some where they rub the paint away. I just elected to keep the paint on it. I hope it's not something I regret later. This is my first manifold riser job, and I'm just kind of picking up as much as I can from the internet and blogs. I go to Mercruiser post sites where people post comments. I've read a lot of comments about torque pressure and how much pressure to put on these nuts. Right now I'm starting to, again, what I read is just hand pressure. Okay, so I've hand tightened all of those. I'm going to clean this off one more time. I've got one more gasket. Now this gasket, keep kicking the camera legs. There's two types of gaskets they sent me. They're these, they're not paper. I don't know if they're graphite or what this material is, but they sent me several of those, and then they sent me metallic ones. And the metallic, I did some research, and the metallic gaskets are more expensive. And the guy that I talked to, the bar manifold representative, said that the preferred gasket is the metallic gasket, so that's the one I'm going to use. Now in this gasket, you'll see it's got two holes here, two slots here, and then it's got small holes here. And those small holes are there for a purpose. From what I understand, they restrict the flow of cooling water back down into the manifold, so it holds water up into the upper end of the cooling system. So it retards or restricts water flow. And this is the gasket that you want up on the top. And again, there's only one way it'll go. It won't go this way. As you can see, there's a gap here, and then so it only goes this way. So this is the way I want to put it in. And I'm going to Permatex both sides just like I did with the other one. There it went on. This is not what I wanted to do. Well, let's fire it up and see how she runs. I've got the air blower on. So I just checked all the joints around the muffler, the risers, the hoses, to see if there are any leaks anywhere. There doesn't appear to be any leaks. I also did the impeller. The impeller isn't leaking. I changed all the spark plugs and the wires, and the engine seems to be hitting on all 8 cylinders. Checked all the joints around the risers. On this side as well, on the starboard side. So everything seems to be running great.